I'm Charlie and I own a Cessna 182 that has completely changed my life. And in this video, I'm gonna show you exactly how to buy your first airplane without wasting a bunch of time or money in the process. So that you know where I'm coming from, this info is based on my own experience purchasing an airplane, but better yet, I went back and interviewed my own flying mentors that guided me through this process. They've collectively purchased dozens of airplanes themselves, but then I also went back and interviewed aviation industry experts from insurance to financing to brokerage and tax and all kinds of stuff, and I used all of those findings to assemble this information. So my goal is that this one video might save you weeks or even months of research. So let's get started. First, if you only take one thing away from this video, here it is. If you are serious about buying an airplane, I cannot emphasize enough that you start looking for a hangar right now. That might sound counterintuitive. Hey, I don't even have an airplane yet. Why do I need a hangar? But listen, the hangar shortage in the US is really challenging. And I've talked to so many people that are ready to buy a plane, but they can't just because they can't find a place to keep it. So here are some tangible ways to do that. First, give your local airport a call and ask them about renting a T hangar. And if they don't have any available, which they probably won't, ask about getting on a wait list. And go ahead and put your name down on that. You're not committing to anything other than being on the list. And even if your name comes up and you already have a different hangar, you can just say, hey, no thanks, and they'll happily go to the next person. So it's a no-brainer to just start getting on waiting lists. Next, I really suggest joining your local EAA chapter. It's the Experimental Aviation Association. This is going to be an awesome source of local community and a great place to network with other pilots and aircraft owners. So once you join your local chapter, ask them if they know of any hangars or anyone about to end a lease on a hangar or anyone looking for a hangar mate. Really just ask around, and the EAA is a great way to get started with this. And next, reach out to all the other airports in your area within a reasonable driving distance and try to get on waiting lists. And then you can also reach out to FBOs at these airports and ask them about long-term lease options. A lot of us are familiar with, overnight stays and things like that if you're traveling, but FBOs sometimes will have room for you to be a long-term client. Now, it won't be cheap, but some of them have chronic space in their hangars and they can hangar you there until you find a more permanent solution. So don't count it out. Basically, there's no magic fix for this other than you just want to put as many lines in the water as you can to try to find a hangar. So if you don't even watch the rest of this video, take this away. You need to start looking for a hangar right now. All right, so this video is going to intentionally cover a lot of detail, but in order to make it really, really clear, I have a free resource for you. It's called the Airplane Buying Roadmap, and you can get it over at airplaneacademy.com/roadmap. And it's basically the Cliff Notes version of this video and then some. It has even more information in it. So at the end of this video, you might think, man, there's a lot to do. Now what? The Airplane Buying Roadmap is going to help just summarize everything I'm saying and give you kind of an order and a methodology. I almost said mythology. That is the wrong word. Methodology on how to go tackle this. There's a rhyme and reason and an order to the way that you do this. And the Airplane Buying Roadmap is just going to help make that really, really clear. It's totally free. airplaneacademy.com/roadmap. Let's get started. So part one of purchasing an airplane is the decision to buy. And so first you'll need to make the decision between buying or renting. And renting could either mean traditional hourly renting, or it could also mean being part of a club and having part ownership in the aircraft. But high level, it's a buy or rent decision. So I rented on and off for years before ultimately purchasing my own airplane. And for a while, it totally made sense to rent. And then eventually it kind of transitioned where it made a lot more sense for me to actually own the airplane. And it came down to three important factors: freedom, frequency, and finances. And I think by asking yourself these same questions I'm about to pose, this can help you understand, is it better to rent right now, or is it the right time to buy? So freedom just means, do I have the freedom I'm looking for in aviation? If your renting situation makes it hard or impossible to ever take the airplane for a full weekend or for an overnight trip, that's kind of what I was experiencing, that can be really limiting. Whereas in ownership, you end up having all of the freedom you could want because you own the thing and you can fly it when and where you want. But some rental and club scenarios have great access to airplanes and freedom isn't an issue. For me, eventually I noticed the main time that the airplane was available was just during weeknights, which is like the least convenient of all, because everyone wants to fly on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon or something like that. And so I was watching a lot of sunsets, paying by the hour to go watch that sunset. So you end up comparing, was that picture worth $400? I'm not sure. Maybe, sure. And I ended up flying to dinner a lot of places. Basically, I just didn't have very much freedom in that situation because the airplane just wasn't available all that often. So the questions to ask here are, do I have the amount of flying freedom, a reasonable amount of freedom, that I would like in a renting situation? Or am I maxed out and the only way to unlock more freedom is by owning the airplane? Second is frequency. How often are you able to fly? And does your rental situation allow you to have the spontaneity that you want? I know for me in renting, spontaneity was just not in my vocabulary, unless it was like a Tuesday night, and I did plenty of that. But in order to get the airplane on like a Saturday, you had to think many Saturdays in advance. And so it was hard to fly as frequently as I wanted, because I couldn't just be, hey, the weather looks great, what are we doing? Let's go fly. Couldn't really do that. Now, when you own, frequency gets solved because you have unlimited access to the aircraft. It's awesome. But if you're in a rental situation where you're flying about as frequently as you want or need, maybe your rental situation isn't like mine, that's awesome. In that case, renting can still be a great thing. So the questions to ask here are this: am I able to fly as much as I realistically want to in renting? And for the most part, am I able to fly when I want? And last is finances. Now, usually the first two, freedom and frequency, totally favor owning versus renting. Who wouldn't want to be able to fly when and where they want for as much as they want? Of course, it's the finances that are usually the sticking point. Usually it's cheaper to rent versus own because you're not paying for all the direct overhead expenses. Well, I guess you're paying for it indirectly through your rental fee, but the point is you literally don't have a hangar rental. You don't have to pay for the maintenance and the annual and the insurance and all that sort of thing. And so while it's not fun to get a credit card bill for the sunset that you just watched from the air, and believe me, I have plenty of those in my logbook, just zoomed into that one flight, it's obviously a lot cheaper to rent than it would be to own and pay 5 figures a year to own the thing. But here's the thing, if you fly enough, your effective hourly rate, even if you own the airplane and you do pay for the hangar and the maintenance and the insurance and all the other things that comes with it, divided by how many hours you're actually flying, it might be cheaper than renting, or it might be comparable, or it might even just be a little bit more. And that's the premium, the extra that you're paying for all of the freedom and frequency that you could want to the aircraft. And so you can't just look at it on how much was that sunset to watch. You really have to keep in mind how many hours are you trying to fly a year? How much is that going to cost you in each situation? So the questions to ask here are this: would owning be similar in price or maybe even less versus renting? Or is the extra expense of owning worth it for all the freedom and frequency? Or based on how many hours I want to fly in a year, is owning prohibitively expensive versus renting? So while I rented, I had mediocre access, freedom and frequency to the aircraft, but I just could not afford to own an airplane. So I was saving up. Eventually, once I knew that I wanted to fly more and more frequently, and I could afford it, and it was kind of similar in terms of an hourly basis to own versus rent, or even a little bit more, I was comfortable with that, and so I really opted for owning. So ask yourselves the questions that we just covered, and if and when you get green lights on all three of these, freedom, frequency, and finances, it's probably time to own. So like I mentioned, finances is usually the last domino to fall in the freedom, frequency, and finances equation. So this begs the question, how much does it cost to own the airplane? So this is the second part of the decision to buy. So the costs of owning are made up in two parts. You got fixed costs and variable costs. Fixed costs occur regardless of whether or not you fly. It's the hangar, the insurance, the inspection. It's the bills you still get in the mail, even if you didn't fly that month, which kind of sucks, but it's there. Now, variable costs are incurred anytime you fly, and pretty much only when you fly. It's mainly fuel, but there's some other items as well. So the more you fly, your fixed costs don't change, but they're spread out across more flight hours, basically brings your effective hourly costs down the more you fly. Now, meanwhile, you incur variable expenses every time you start the engine. Now, honestly, I think some of us can overfixate on just the purchase price. So you overemphasize how much airplane can I buy, and let me go look at listings that are within that price range and start daydreaming. I've done it. You've probably done it too. But I think we can underestimate the ongoing ownership costs of the airplane and factor that into what's our budget for buying. So my airplane back in 2016, I got a Cessna 182. It was $93,000, which even in 2016 was an awesome deal. And it's been a really, really great airplane. So it's not like there was like a ton wrong with it or something. I just got a really good deal on it. I have spent that and more ever since then owning and operating that airplane. And so that really has to be factored in. It's not just the purchase price. It's kind of like the saying, it's not the horse that'll get you, it's the hay. I think that's a saying. If not, it was like one comment one time and I attributed it to being a saying. But either way, it illustrates the point and you don't want to undercount it. Now, there are a lot of moving pieces here when it comes to budgeting for an airplane. And so to make things easier, I put a financial model together in Excel. It's actually in Google Sheets, but you can download it as Excel and you can get it for free. If you go to airplaneacademy.com/roadmap, like I mentioned earlier, you can grab a copy of the airplane buying roadmap and the financial model will also come along with it. Using a basic model like this will help you realize the commitment of owning an airplane and actually operating and maintaining it, so you get an all-in picture, not just the purchase price. So for example, you could put in some basic assumptions into this model and discover what it would cost you on an annual, monthly, and even per flight hour basis, which will also help you compare it against renting. You can obviously make your own, but I wanted to save you some time and give you a head start. So it's a simple model, but I think you'll like playing around with it. So airplaneacademy.com/roadmap, and I will send over that model for free right away. Now, a word of caution. The main thing I think you want to do here is you start playing around with the numbers is not get like right up to your budget. Like for example, if you say, yeah, I can afford, I'm making up numbers, but $20,000 per year to fly for all in. Don't work the model to where if you do everything perfectly and there are no unforeseen things that happen, it's exactly $19,999. I'm $1 under budget, baby. Don't do that. You really want to bake in some buffer. And I know that sounds simple, but you really don't want to get into the situation where you're tempted to overlook any maintenance items or skimp on maintenance. It's just not worth it at all. Or if you're over budget, you could start to resent the airplane, or your loved one starts resenting the airplane. You don't want to come anywhere close to that cliff, so to speak. So if your budget's 20K or whatever the number is, try to see if you can work out a model that gets you some percentage, and you decide the percentage, some percentage under that. Maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 30, 40%, I don't know, but have some wiggle room in case your assumptions are wrong or unforeseen things come up. So go use a model like this or make your own. Either way, just do this ahead of time to not overly fixate on just the purchase price. You want to think about what are the all-in costs and commitment going to be. Now, this might be a little bit of a circular analysis, because understanding what your purchase price range could be is going to really tell you what types of airplanes maybe you could buy. They're going to have specific stats when it comes to like fuel burn and different things that you then go put back in the model, which then adjusts the numbers, and you kind of go in a circle. But hopefully you're starting to dial in farther or closer and closer into what type of airplane is going to be right for you, which is actually the next step. Now, in terms of what is the quote unquote right airplane, it's kind of a flawed question, because really this is not a right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong airplane, but you do need to know that buying an airplane is all about trade-offs. So there's no best airplane. Totally depends on your unique circumstances, and more importantly, the mission that you need this airplane to accomplish. Because each airplane has something that it's better at or worse at than other airplanes. It's kind of like when you're playing, like I play Mario Kart with my nephews and stuff, and you're like picking your car. They just pick one because they like the color, right? But I pick one because it's like, oh, the acceleration is this and the top speed is this. And so there's all trade-offs, and airplanes are actually kind of similar to that, just more complex. So the key here is to pick an airplane that's going to work for 80% or more of your missions. Now, to answer that, I like to think through what I call the 6-point mission. Answering these 6 questions is going to help you understand what type of plane is going to be a good fit for you. So the first question is budget. What is your budget for both the purchase and, more importantly, the ongoing operation of this airplane? The previous step, as we discussed, will help determine that. Knowing your budget range will certainly include and exclude certain types of aircraft, so this is a helpful starting point. The second question is useful load. How much do you routinely, that's an important word, routinely need to carry between people and stuff? Now, I would venture to say that this is the stat that's probably the most limiting in small airplanes. It's usually not that the airplane's too slow or doesn't go far enough or doesn't have enough seats. It's usually that it can't carry enough, or we can carry people and we can carry stuff and we could go far, but we can't actually carry any fuel once we put all that stuff in it. So I find that the question of useful load is often even more important than range or speed or some of these other things, because it's going to impact all of those things. And so understanding how much you're probably going to need to carry on an average basis 80% of the time is a really, really important question to answer. Third is the number of seats. How many people do you need to carry? And remember that just because an airplane has 4 seats doesn't mean it can realistically carry 4 people plus fuel and bags. This is why the useful load question is so important. So some airplanes with 4 seats will realistically carry 4 people, but actually a lot of them just realistically can't. Fourth is speed. How fast do you need to go? Not how fast do you want to go, but how fast are you actually needing to get there? Keep in mind, airplanes are already usually significantly faster than cars, and you're also going direct to your destination, not winding through highways that are generally pointed in the right direction. And so if you're going 130 knots, that's still really fast. And so it's easy to think, well, one airplane goes 130 knots, the other one goes 170 knots. That's so much faster. But unless you're routinely going a really long way, that's just not going to add up to a huge time difference. And so be realistic when you're asking yourself, how fast do I really need to go? Another thing worth considering on speed is something that a good friend and mentor of mine, Bob, if you're watching, thanks Bob, pointed out. He said, you know, anytime we go on a flying trip, as soon as we get there, all we talk about is the flying. We talk about that flight and previous flights. All we're doing is talking about flying. So why are we in such a hurry to get there 0.4 hours faster, especially if we're trying to build time in the process? So not that that's an excuse to just go buy the slowest airplane you can find, but you're still moving a lot faster than cars. So what's the hurry? Just be realistic when you're asking yourself, how fast do I need to go? Not how fast do I want to go? Fifth is range and performance. How far do you need to go, and what kind of performance do you need along the way? Do you routinely need short field capability, or are you doing long trips, short trips? What are you needing the airplane to do? Now keep in mind, just because an airplane has 5 or 6 hours of endurance doesn't mean that you or your passengers will. And so in my 182, it's got great range, but honestly, I need a break before the airplane needs a break. So range isn't to me the end all be all stat for my mission because I'm gonna wanna stop along the way anyway. So this is again why I think useful load is maybe a more important stat than even range, unless you're really in a situation where you gotta travel a long ways for business, you gotta get there quickly. And last is equipment. How do you need the aircraft equipped? Do you need it IFR capable or VFR only? Think about what kind of flying you're gonna be doing. When you answer all of these with realistic and not necessarily aspirational assumptions, it's gonna help you narrow down what kind of airplane you need. And then some basic Google searching can help you identify what types of airplanes fulfill that mission. To give you an example from my own story, just to kind of bring this to life, this is what my 6-point mission looked like. And I'd only been renting 172, so I didn't totally know what my mission as an owner was going to be, but this was my best guess. My purchase price, I had up to $120K to work with. For useful load, ideally, I wanted the ability to realistically take 4 people and fuel if needed. So 1,000+ pounds of useful load would be ideal so that I could actually carry fuel and light bags on top of people. So number of seats, I needed at least 4. Now for speed, this wasn't really a deal breaker for me because of all the things I mentioned earlier. I was honestly fine with whatever. So it's helpful to be flexible in some of these and kind of know, okay, this is a deal breaker for me. It has to accomplish this, but these other things I can be flexible on because you might need to be. As for range and performance, I really wasn't so concerned about range since I assumed that if I had a high useful load, I'd also have reasonable range too, because when I didn't have much in the plane, I could always carry a lot of fuel. Now, as for performance, I wanted the ability to go to grass strips and experience the backcountry from time to time. So reasonable short field capability was definitely on my list. I knew I wouldn't just be landing on 5,000-foot runways all day. And as for equipment, I knew I wanted it IFR equipped. And then on top of that, ideally, I wanted an autopilot and an HSI. You can add those after the fact, but if you can find an airplane that already has it, sometimes it can be cheaper to just buy it already equipped. So ultimately, I selected a Cessna 182 because I figured if it was the first and last airplane I ever bought, it's the only one I could own, it would be able to do a little bit of everything. And that has totally held true. You know, it doesn't have the most useful load. It's not the fastest airplane, but honestly, it has a pretty respectable stat in all of those areas of the 6-point mission. It really will do a little bit of everything. And so I've just been over the moon about a 182. I think it's like, if you're questioning what airplane, I've never met a 182 owner that's like, yeah, I own a 182, I wish I hadn't. Like everybody's like, I love that. Or the only reason I got out of it is because I wanted something smaller or bigger or whatever. It wasn't because something was wrong with the airplane, it's just because their mission changed. So it's been an awesome airplane. If you need one, I'm biased, but it's a great airplane. So this is really important. Once you have an idea of the kind of airplane you want, it is really, really important to go get familiar with the different models of that airplane's history. So for example, if you know you want a 182, don't just go to Trade-A-Plane or the different listing websites and say, this model year always seems to be within my price range and this model year is not. So I guess I'll go with this one. I mean, that might be what happens, but there is a reason that maybe the market says, hey, this model is gonna be a little bit different, or this model is a little bit more premium, and it doesn't always coincide with age. They're changing things, or they changed things across the different models. Sometimes it was great improvement. Sometimes the market would say, yeah, I know what they were going for, but actually the previous generation of that is a lot better. So one way you can do this research is by joining one of the associations for that type of airplane. So these are sometimes called type clubs or type groups or owner associations. So for example, in my 182, there's the Cessna Pilots Association, and there are several others like it. But this one actually has a specific resource where they deep dive what did Cessna change in all of the 182 models from day one through today. And then you can also go into the forums and look for what's the chatter, or maybe even just make a post and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying 182, here's my price range, this is kind of the models I'm considering. Can you maybe chime in with anything I should know about these models? And then use that to supplement your own research. People will chime in, you'll find a lot of information about that so you can be more informed. And also a quick tip, if you're ultimately looking for a broker to help you buy an airplane, these owner groups are an awesome resource to find one because you'll be able to ask around, ask who other people use. There might be some guru in the club that everyone just worships this guy because he's the 182 guy, that sort of thing. And so I joined one of these after I bought my airplane. So I'm telling you, so hopefully you can join it before you buy the airplane. It's just a wealth of knowledge. Also joining an EAA chapter can be really helpful on this front because they're gonna have experience, the members in that group will have experience hopefully with the airplane you're looking to buy. They might be able to point you to a broker, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of work that you can do before you ever buy the airplane to get really, really well informed. So once you know what kind of airplane you want to buy, now comes the fun part. You get to actually look at listings. But I have an important warning for you here. It's that when you're looking through listings, it's really easy for emotions to completely take over and for all of your logic to just go out the window. And I can prove that because in my own story, when we got there to see the airplane, I was in love with the listing. We flew out to Florida to see it. All things were good. It's a great airplane. I was really excited to hopefully buy it. We got there, I noticed, I go, oh, that's kind of strange. The fairings connecting the struts on the wings and on the wheels are painted a totally different color than the rest of the airplane. They're not white, and I don't really like how those look. Turns out they're pretty expensive to actually change. And I thought, man, was there a picture about that? Did they just withhold that? And sure enough, every single picture of the airplane, clear as day, you could see these things did not match. And I just totally overlooked it because I was overcome with the excitement of like, this is it. This is the airplane. I've been waiting for this my whole life. My dreams are coming true. And you can miss stuff like that. So if it's easy to miss things as obvious as, oh yeah, that part of the plane is not even painted remotely close to the rest of the other plane. If I can miss that, then what are the other things that are really easy to miss? And so you really have to try to check your emotions at the door, and I didn't do this well, but I'm hopefully helping everyone else to remember to do this. Check your emotions at the door, think objectively, and in particular, try to get your detective hat on and really search the listings for any red flags. So here are some of the things I look for in listings: the price, the year, and the model. And like I mentioned, different models have different pros and cons. Things that the manufacturer changed over the course of time, so take notice to the model. Look at the registration. Is it a US-based aircraft or not? Look at the pictures and take particular, I mean, that's obvious, look at the pictures, but I mean, take particular notice to the airplane itself and also its surroundings. You can sometimes tell a lot about how an airplane was maybe treated based on the photos. Look at the quality of the pictures and if they obviously omitted something like the interior or the panel. I'm always surprised. People don't take high quality pictures and makes you wonder a little bit about the person selling the airplane and how they treated the airplane. Think about the location and if it might have been in a humid environment that can be more prone to corrosion. Look at the total time on the airplane. Look at the engine time and the date of the last overhaul, because sometimes engines have a really low amount of hours, but they were overhauled like 30 years ago. So do the math. That airplane flew like 4 hours a year, which is not good for the engine. Look at the propeller time. Think about if is it equipped for IFR or VFR only. Look at the equipment and any modifications that have been made to the airplane. Also look at its damage history. And then importantly, well, I mean, all of these are important, but don't miss this one. Look to see if it has complete or lost logbooks. The logbooks are the aircraft's diary, and it's the provable history of what's happened to the airplane. And so if the logbooks are lost or incomplete, it can significantly impact the market value of the airplane because you can't prove what has or hasn't happened to the airplane. So usually when I'm looking through listings, I'm looking for red flags. The more you do it, the more trained your eye will become on spotting things, or how do people phrase things that are pretty negative about the airplane, but in a creative way. And the more you look through listings, the more you'll know what I'm talking about there. But this is gonna help you understand what's a solid listing versus one that's cool, but we need to pass on it. As for where to look through these listings, there's several large websites like Trade-A-Plane, Controller, Barnstormers, those are some of the big ones. And then there's some newer ones like Wingswap and some others popping up. I usually go to Trade-A-Plane because there's tons of listings there, and I just think it's laid out the cleanest. It's the most pleasing on the eye, in my opinion. But something worth noting here is that some airplanes will be listed on multiple sites, but not all the websites. And so they're all worth checking in to make sure. There's gonna be some duplication across sites, but you might find one that, oh, it's listed on this site, but none of the others, and you don't wanna overlook it. Now, in doing all this research, there is one single thing here, please listen, that's either going to make this an invaluable resource to you or a gigantic waste of time. And that's whether or not you choose to document this research you're doing. You're gonna be looking through a lot of listings, and so you might as well take the extra 60 seconds it's nothing, just to write down the things that you are discovering about these airplanes, because this will end up turning into a comparable model or a comp model. You might recognize that term. That's going to be an invaluable resource to you. Just like when you buy a house, you might ask your realtor, hey, what are the comps in this neighborhood? You're asking, what are the comparable data points? And your agent says, well, there's a similar three bath house in the same neighborhood that sold for X, but it has 200 more square feet, but I think it's a good comparable data point. It's really not much different here in aviation. Really, the only difference is that we're going off of the asking price and not the final sales price, because we don't have that info, but it's still a really useful data point. So if you're just looking at listings and it's just a daydream session, that's really fun, but it's also not very productive. And so take the extra few seconds to write down some of this research. I'll show you how in just a second. And it's gonna really build up your knowledge base as to what is a fair deal or a really good deal, or maybe a deal that's like, hey, that's crazy. I don't wanna pursue that one. It's gonna help you understand all these trends. So the way that I do this is I build an Excel model or Google Sheets or whatever you use, but just use a spreadsheet and put these parameters in it. Put a link to the listing so you can find it later. Sometimes they expire after a while, but it's still helpful to write down. Write down the tail number, the year, the model, the asking price, total time of the airplane, the engine time, propeller time. Next, put the exterior and the paint. And for this one, this starts to get a little subjective, because what do you write down for paint? I like to use a 1 to 3 grade. 1 can be the best or the worst. 3 can be the best or the worst. Doesn't matter as long as you're consistent with it. Basically, we're just trying to take something that's subjective and turn it into something that has a numerical data point, so that you can compare it one versus the other. So you'll do this similarly for the other things I'm about to mention, like the interior, 1 to 3 grade. Avionics, 1 to 3 grade. Upgrades or modifications, 1 to 3 grade. And then finally, complete logbooks. This is a yes or no question, or a 0 or 1, however you want to do it. And then damage history, yes or no. So if you take the time to do this simple step, I promise it's gonna make a massive difference in your research. It's also pretty fun. I mean, it takes something that would otherwise just be a daydream session and actually makes it really productive at the same time. So it's a win-win. It's really gonna help you in the buying process. So while you're having fun looking at listings, there's some other things you want to do in the background to get your ducks in a row. That way, if and when you do find a listing that you seriously want to pursue, you're in position to do so. If you've ever bought a house, as soon as you find one you like you gotta move fast, and it can move fast. So you wanna be prepared to do so. So here are some of the things you want to do. First is to get your pre-approval for financing, if this is applicable to you. So similar to what you do on a house, it's helpful to have your pre-approval letter for up to a certain purchase price before you actually make an offer. Second, you want to contact your aviation insurance agent and make sure they're aware of your intentions. And while you won't know the exact airplane yet, obviously, it would be really smart to get their input on your ability to be insured in that kind of airplane first. So generally knowing, hey, I want to buy a 182 is enough to get them in the right direction. You don't want to buy a plane and then figure out how to get insurance on it. That sounds obvious, but it's easy to overlook. So you can start these conversations with insurance agents even while you're looking. Third, ideally, you want to know who's going to do your pre-buy inspection before you even find the airplane, so that way they're ready to mobilize once you find the airplane. Now, if you already know what airport you're going to be based at, again, ideal to already have a hangar, the mechanic on the field, and most fields have some mechanic on the field, that would be a good place to start and ask them if they do pre-buys. Now, alternatively, you can join your local EAA chapter and ask around for a mechanic. Ask everyone else, hey, who do you use? Who do you like? See if they do pre-buys. And then also you can join an association for the kind of airplane you're wanting to buy, like we talked about, and ask in those forums. That might help uncover some recommendations on people you can use that are skilled in that particular aircraft. You will need to pay for their time and travel to do this inspection, but it is worth the cost. Now, a word of caution here, don't have the seller's mechanic or the person who's been doing all the maintenance on the airplane over the years do the pre-purchase inspection, or let them say, hey, it just came out of annual last week, we'll give you that report and there's your pre-buy. You really want to be able to hire an objective third party to go analyze the airplane because it's going to be easy for the mechanic that's been doing all the work to have a glowing review of their own work. And not that they're not trustworthy, but you just want to be able to have a neutral third party doing this inspection. Fourth, you want to make your bank aware that if and when you do go under contract for a plane, you're going to be putting a deposit into an escrow account. So you'll want to be knowledgeable with how to make a wire at your particular banking institution. Some are more intuitive than others. So that way there won't be delays when it comes time. You also want to know the wire cutoff deadlines and who you should contact to make that happen. They might have fraud prevention steps for you to go through first, and you just want to know how all that's going to work. So that way there aren't delays when you actually need to send the money. You don't want the time that you're supposed to wire the money to be the first time you're calling the bank saying, hey, I'm buying an airplane, How do I send them money? That sounds obvious, it's easier to overlook. And fifth, as stressed at the beginning of the video, if you are serious about getting an airplane, please start looking for a hangar right now, or at least know which FBO might be able to take you on as a long-term client if needed. You want to have a place for the airplane to go once you buy it. So having your ducks in a row on these items is going to help you move expeditiously once you find a listing that's worth pursuing. And if you've documented your research along the way, it'll help you know if you have a listing that's worth strongly pursuing in the first place. So once you find a listing that you want to pursue, typically you'll get on the phone with the selling agent to talk to them about the airplane and then hopefully try to get them to hold it for you while you can come out and look at it. Now, most brokers will honor their word of not selling it from under you. It's kind of a first come, first serve thing if you can get out there reasonably quick. And so in addition to seeing the airplane and flying it, the other big item to check off is the pre-purchase inspection, also called the pre-buy. The pre-buy is usually similar to an annual inspection where they inspect the whole aircraft, minus overly invasive things like disassembling the crankcase. They're not going to do that. Airworthiness issues that come up, those are typically the seller's responsibility to fix, pending a negotiation, but usually that's on the seller. And then cosmetic issues are typically the buyer's responsibility to fix if they want to. Sometimes overlooked in the pre-purchase inspection is conducting a complete logbook overview, looking through every single page of the logbooks and assessing the engine, the propeller, and the airframe logbooks side by side to understand the full history of the aircraft. Sometimes they'll upload this digitally, so while you're waiting to get out there, maybe you're going to go out there in a few days, you can review this in the meantime to speed things up, but you definitely want to review these. And that can also include reviewing the aircraft's STCs or supplemental type certificates, 337s, and any other FAA filings that show certain repairs or alterations have been done to the aircraft. And then you can compare those to the logbook entries. Now, that might sound intimidating, but your mechanic and or your buying agent should be able to help with this diligence. And just remember, don't have the seller's mechanic do this inspection for you. Try to get a neutral third party to help you out. Based on what you find out in the pre-buy, you might want to renegotiate the deal a little bit or just go with it or maybe even walk away. If you've ever bought a house before, you know this. Once you go through the inspection, you have to make a decision and there's no right or wrong decision. It's, hey, do we want to negotiate this? Do we want to press forward? Do we want to walk away? Something in between. It's kind of the art of the deal, so to speak. But my advice to you is to not get emotionally committed to this airplane. There are many other airplanes out there. If you don't feel good about this one, or there's enough red flags starting to add up, don't be afraid to walk away. You will save yourself a lot of money just flying home on an airliner, even though you had to pay for that expense. That'll be way less than buying the wrong airplane or one with tons of issues that you're gonna have to pay for, I promise. So don't get emotionally wrapped up and committed to buying the airplane. Just stay logical about it. So once all the pre-buy diligence has been completed on the aircraft and the buyer and the seller both agree to the sale, the actual process of purchasing the airplane and the paperwork stuff, it's actually pretty simple. So here are the main things that happen. First is the money and the title to the airplane. Money is usually wired to an escrow agent if one is being used, and for parties that don't know each other, this is highly recommended for the safety of the purchase. The escrow agent will wire the money to the seller and deliver the aircraft's title to the buyer. It's very similar, really just like buying a house. You don't wire the money directly to the seller and hope they simultaneously hand you the keys to the house and the title. No, you work with a neutral third party, the escrow agent, the title company, to handle the transaction, so that way there's no breach of trust and everything gets done correctly at the right time. Second is the paperwork. An asset purchase agreement is signed, and a bill of sale, which is basically a fancy receipt, is also created that simply states that the aircraft was purchased from one party by another. And finally is the registration. The bill of sale, remember the fancy receipt, and the change of registration form, those are both sent to the FAA along with a $5 processing fee. And that's pretty much it for basic piston aircraft. Now on jets and things, it can be more complicated with parts programs and engine programs and some different things that have to get solved. But for basic airplanes, it's really simple. It's some money, it's a little bit of paperwork and a registration form and $5 to the FAA, and you're off to the races. Once you own the plane and you're in charge of maintaining it, honestly, it can be kind of overwhelming at first because compared to when you rented or just you were in the flight school and you dropped the keys off, like your responsibility was done and you didn't have to think about it. Once you own the airplane, there's a lot more to think about. And so it can be overwhelming at first. I have found it to be pretty digestible and not that hard to keep up with once I realized that all of your maintenance kind of falls into a few key categories. Your annual inspection is the big one. It's probably the most expensive maintenance event you'll hopefully have in the year. Second is intervals as required by equipment. So for example, if your airplane is IFR certified, then every 24 months, you're gonna need your pitot-static check. But typically your mechanic can kind of time these to happen at or around your annual and batch a lot of this together. So that way you're not doing a bunch of one-off inspections at random times of the year. Next are oil changes. Now for me, there's a little bit of a surprise because I change the oil in my plane a lot more than I do in my car because I don't drive that many miles in my car every year. So a lot of times it's every 50 engine hours or 6 months, whichever comes first. So you'll just want to keep track of this and plan ahead on oil changes. So that way you're not due for an oil change right at the same moment you're planning a trip that might have 10 or 20 hours of flying the airplane on it. It's not hard to track, you'll get used to it. Next are airworthiness directives or ADs and service bulletins. Now airworthiness directives are, quote, legally enforceable regulations issued by the FAA in accordance with 14 CFR Part 39 to correct an unsafe condition in a product. That's a big deal. Part 39 defines a product as an aircraft, engine, propeller, or appliance. So it could almost be anything. It's kind of like getting a recall notice in the mail that says, hey, by the way, your car airbags don't work. So we're gonna need you to fix that. And so I'm being funny, but it is kind of like that. But the good thing is it doesn't always apply. Like you might still get it in the mail, but your serial number for the aircraft or whatever part the AD applies to, you might not actually have one in your airplane that's within that serial number range. Or even if you do, it might be, hey, this needs to be addressed, or it might just be, it needs to be inspected immediately or comply with it at the next annual. You're gonna have to read it and work with your mechanic to understand how to comply with it. But just because you get one in the mail doesn't mean, oh man, there goes a few grand. It could. It definitely could, but it doesn't always mean that, so don't lose sleep over it. The other thing about ADs is that if you have one that pertains to your aircraft, it might be something that you have to keep up with on an ongoing basis. For example, in my Cessna 182, there's an AD on the seat rails, and I've had to replace both my seat rails over the course of time for this. They're worried that if the holes that the seat locks into when you slide it forward and backwards, those get at all damaged, there's a risk of the seat, just free flowing forwards or backwards. And if it happens during takeoff, you can slide all the way back. It could be a really bad deal. And so that's one of the things on the list that I have to comply with. And I've had to replace those parts more than once over the last 7 years and such. So I want to say ADs are annoying, but you obviously want to know about them. Like if there's a legit safety issue or could be an issue on your airplane, you want to know about it. And this is why you want to have some buffer in your financial model, because you don't know if something like this is going to happen and all of a sudden you're going to have to comply with it once or ongoing or that sort of thing. So don't be worried about it, but they do come up. Similar but different to ADs are service bulletins. These are issued by manufacturers about critical and useful information on safety, maintenance, and product improvement. Now the FAA says that compliance with service bulletins may or may not be mandatory, but they should not be ignored. And then finally is ad hoc maintenance. Oh no, the front strut is flat. Might need more nitrogen or a new seal or something. It's unplanned things that arise as part of normal wear and tear on the airplane. Now you'll get into a rhythm, you'll get used to this. It doesn't have to be super intimidating. It's just an adjustment because now you're not just the pilot, you're also the pilot and you're responsible for maintaining the airplane. A small regret I have on maintenance is that I didn't read the book Engines by Mike Bush sooner in my ownership journey. He is one of the industry's leading experts, maybe the expert, on piston aircraft maintenance, and his book has so many insights that are understandable even by the non-engineer like me. He has a lot of practical advice and information in there about owning and maintaining an airplane that the flight school is just not going to teach you because it's not necessarily their job to teach that to you. And so I wish that I would have read this from day one. There's so much practical knowledge in there about how your engine works past what they teach you in flight school, and what are some of the issues and errors that can arise over the course of time in your particular engine and that sort of thing. So it is very, very much worth investing in. One of the many practical takeaways I got out of that book was the importance of doing an oil analysis at every single oil change. It's not expensive, but it's really, really insightful. The oil analysis gives you trend data on how much metal is being found in the oil at the microscopic level. And based on what type of metal that is, it tells you what part of the engine it might have come from and helps you be able, it's basically an early diagnostic tool to see the health of your engine. Because usually airplane engines don't just quit out of nowhere. There's usually some signs and symptoms along the way if we're willing to look for it, unless you just starve the engine of fuel. But as far as like maintenance and wear and tear and things, the oil analysis is really revealing and helping get a head start on the health of your engine. Next, remember that any maintenance that's performed on the aircraft will always generate logbook entries. These need to be added into your aircraft logbooks and kept in a safe place. And remember, losing these logbooks can significantly impact the market value of your airplane. So treat these logbooks like they're worth a ton, because they are worth a ton. I usually keep them locked up in the safe unless I'm adding to the logbooks or I'm taking the airplane annual. Other than that, they're always kept in a safe place. You can also digitize your logbooks by taking pictures of them anytime there's new entries and upload it into the cloud. Or there's also some really cool up and coming services like PlaneLogix and others that will not only digitize your logbooks and put them into an organized format, but then also remind you of upcoming intervals intervals and other things. The point is you just want to treat your logbooks really intentionally. Don't just throw them in the basement or the back of your car and forget about them. They're worth a lot. They're really important, so you want to treat them like it. I think one of the challenging things about buying an airplane is that unless you have someone knowledgeable to guide you through the process, many of us are just forced to consult the Google search bar, which can kind of be a scary place to just aggregate random pieces of information from online. If you don't know what you don't know, it's hard to even know what to search for, and the things you find may or may not even be that helpful. And so I really believe that you need a guide walking you through this process. There's just a lot at stake. It's a really, really big process. I was really, really fortunate to have aviation mentors that guided me through the process based on their experience of buying dozens of airplanes themselves. So after I bought my airplane, I went back and talked with them. I not only talked with them, but I interviewed them. I got on camera to kind of relive the process, relive all the advice that they gave me, and then also document all the things that I've learned through the buying process and the airplane ownership process since 2016. And then I went a step further and I contacted a bunch of aviation industry experts, from brokerage to maintenance to personal finance to tax and aviation insurance and more. And I just asked them all the questions that I had when I was buying an airplane, and I think other people would have as well. And it took months and months to aggregate all this, edit it, put it all together. But I did because I want more people to be able to become airplane owners, because it's totally changed my life and I believe it can change yours. And that resource that came together is called the Airplane Buying System. So for those of you that are looking for more help and guidance on airplane buying, the Airplane Buying System is truly an awesome and robust resource that I really want you to know about. It's 30 plus videos that cover every single step of the buying process in detail so that you can save money and save time. That's my goal. And I really believe it'll help you learn about a year of research in only 9 hours of the course. I really promise this is going to be far cheaper and more efficient than Googling around and looking for advice. It really will save you time and money. And it also comes with an entire 1-year refund policy. So you could go through the course. If you want a refund, of course I'm going to give you a refund. And online courses pretty much never have a refund policy, but I do, and it lasts an entire year. I've tried to price it as affordably as I can, but I also want to let you know that if you get the free airplane buying roadmap at airplaneacademy.com/roadmap, I'm also going to send you info as to how you can get the airplane buying system at a reduced price. So you can learn more about the airplane buying system at airplaneacademy.com/own. Just keep in mind that the price you see on the page, I'm going to give you a way to get that at a discounted rate. So next steps are really simple coming out of this video. Go grab the airplane buying roadmap. It's totally free. airplaneacademy.com/roadmap, and I'll send you more info as to how to get the airplane buying system at a reduced price. You can respond to any of those emails and they come directly to me. They don't go to anybody else, and I'd be glad to help you out. I'm rooting for you, and I can't wait for you to own an airplane.